In 1978, General Motors thought it had found the perfect weapon against the energy crisis: a diesel engine for your driveway. American-built, V8-powered, and promising to sip fuel while the rest of the country bled money at the gas pump. It was supposed to save the company. Instead, it became one of the worst engines ever bolted into a car. It bankrupted no factory, fired no shots, but it quietly destroyed the reputation of an entire brand and poisoned diesel for American drivers for the next 30 years. This is the story of how one shortcut made to save a few dollars turned into a disaster that GM is still remembered for today. To understand why this engine was born, you have to understand the panic of the 1970s. The oil embargo had strangled America, gas lines stretched around the block, and then came the government with a new set of rules called CAFE, Corporate Average Fuel Economy. These standards demanded that automakers slash fuel consumption or face crippling penalties. GM had a problem. Americans still loved big, heavy, full-size cars, but those cars drank fuel. The solution seemed obvious. Mercedes-Benz had been selling diesel passenger cars for years. Diesel burned less fuel and went farther on every gallon, so GM made a decision. It would build the first mass-market American diesel V8, and it would put it in everything. There was just one catch. GM didn't have time to design a diesel engine from scratch, and it didn't want to spend the money either. So the engineers at Oldsmobile reached for something they already had: their legendary 350 gasoline V8, a proven, well-loved engine. The plan was simple: convert the gas engine into a diesel, use the same factory tooling, the same machines, the same production line. On paper, it would save a fortune. But here is where physics stopped being polite. A diesel engine doesn't work like a gasoline engine. It runs on compression, pressure so violent it can be 3 times higher than what a gas engine ever sees. That pressure tries to rip the cylinder head clean off the top of the block, and to hold a cylinder head down, you need head bolts, strong ones, many of them. The gasoline 350 used 10 head bolts per side. A proper diesel needed more, but adding more bolts meant retooling the entire factory. New machines, new money. And so, the engineers left the bolt pattern exactly as it was. 10 bolts, same as the gas engine. It was a decision made by accountants, not by physics, and it was the single mistake that would doom everything. According to the scandal that later surfaced, the engineer responsible for the diesel's development knew the truth. He insisted the engine was not ready for production. He warned them. And for that warning, he was reportedly pushed aside. The marketing machine was already running. The brochures were printed. The dealerships were waiting. GM had decided this engine would launch in 1978, and nothing, not even the truth, was going to stop it. And at first, it looked like a triumph. The cars sold like hotcakes. The diesel option showed up in Oldsmobiles, Cadillacs, Buicks, Chevrolets, Pontiacs, even GMC trucks. America couldn't get enough. In fact, a 1978 survey of 1,000 Oldsmobile Diesel owners found that over 97% said they would buy another one. The fuel economy was real. The savings were real. For a few short months, GM looked like a genius. And then the bills came due. Those 10 head bolts began to stretch. As they stretched, the head gaskets failed, and once a gasket failed, coolant flooded into the combustion chamber. The engine would hydrolock, seize, and die. But that was only the beginning. There was no water separator in the fuel system, so water contaminated the diesel and destroyed the fragile injection pump from the inside out. And here's the part that turned a mechanical failure into a betrayal. When these engines broke down, owners took them to GM dealerships, but the dealer mechanics had never been trained to repair a diesel. They guessed. They repaired them wrong. And GM did nothing to fix the underlying flaw for years. Failure rates were not just bad, they were spectacular. By some estimates, up to a quarter of every GM vehicle fitted with this engine suffered a major mechanical failure. The cars that promised to save you money were now the most expensive mistakes their owners had ever made. Now, here's the detail almost nobody knows. The part that makes this engine truly historic. When California's environmental agency bought 9 of these cars for testing, every single one of them broke down before the testing could even be completed. The state refused to allow it to be sold there for 2 full years, not over pollution, but because the cars simply couldn't survive. The lawsuits exploded. Class actions piled up. By 1983, furious buyers had completely overwhelmed the Federal Trade Commission. And the public anger was so enormous, so unprecedented, that several states scrambled to write a brand new kind of consumer protection, a law that would force manufacturers to take back defective vehicles. Today, you know that law by its nickname, the Lemon Law. The very law that protects every car buyer in America today was born, in large part, out of the wreckage of this one engine. To their credit, GM's engineers eventually went back and fixed it. By 1981, a redesigned version arrived, with a stronger head design, better bolts, and improved gaskets. It was, finally, a decent engine, but it was too late. The name was already poison. Resale values had collapsed. Trust was gone. GM quietly killed the engine after 1985. The damage didn't stop with Oldsmobile. This single engine convinced an entire generation of Americans that diesel meant unreliable, slow, and broken. It poisoned the diesel passenger car market in the United States for the next 3 decades. It would take more than 30 years before American drivers would trust a diesel car again. All of it from a single decision to save money on a few extra bolts. It is the perfect reminder of a lesson the auto industry keeps relearning. You cannot cut a corner on physics. Physics always sends the bill. And in 1978, General Motors paid it with the trust of millions.